important aspect of shaping the revolution, of course. And not just cinema, but, he was focused on ideology in general. So it makes a lot of sense why he was so interested in opera, cinema, etc. So, in light of that, we are doing this thing right now on our Juche's Day, which is that we read from Kim Jong Il's On the Art of Cinema book, and then we watch a DPRK movie. Right now, and this, by the way, was written in 1973. Right now, we're on the first part here, which is working a way through the part that is on life and literature, which is talking about the writing aspect of cinema. So we're on this part right here. The seed is the core of literary work. I would be very curious to know if he was aware of Marshall McLuhan. Not sure. Good question. If a writer is to produce a good piece of work, he must first select the right seed, which is the core of a literary work. Pick the right seed, comrades. I love the way he gives advice about these things in this book. If we compare a written work to a living organism, the question arises: what is the core of the life? I always press that fucking button. Okay. If we compare a written work to a living organism, the question arises: what is the core of life with which the organism is imbued? And where is it located? In order to build the organic structure of a literary piece, it is necessary to have a clear vision of the fundamental principle which permeates all the elements of an artistic image and welds them into an integral whole. There used to be lengthy arguments in literary circles about what it was that formed the basis of artistic images, determined the direction of the creative process, and impelled it forward. But no clear-cut answer could be found. This question has only been correctly answered by our party's theoretical concept of Juche-oriented art and literature. Oh, firing shots. Firing shots at bourgeois literature. A long time ago, the great leader Comrade Kim Il-sung said that literary work must contain the core of convincing ideological substance. This core of a literary work is the main factor in defining the content of the work and determining the basic structure which gives life to the image. It is also why I would say, in my opinion, even when we're watching a movie that seemingly has that structure of like the basic romance movie, has this underlying ideological threading and message that makes you feel for the characters in the movie and makes you feel stuff like watching the movie that you don't get from watching a lot of Western movies. And instead in the West, they rely on more like cheap emotional tricks. You'll see this as we go through the movies more and more, but you probably have already seen something like this in watching Comrade Kim Goes Flying, for example, or The Story of Her Home that we watched before that. It makes their characters so much more connected because, unlike in the West, where you either deny to yourself that there's even a political message, or you're getting direct funding and influence from like some State Department ghoul, right? In the West, it's like you either pretend there is no political message and it's just following the mainstream background assumptions, which are themselves, of course, a political message that capitalism is intrinsic, imperialism is just the inherent way that society must be structured, that big capitalists are generally good, the working class are just background characters. Of course, there's exceptions to all of these things, right? But that forms the overarching basis of like movie making in our capitalist society. What was the movie of the young woman who took care of the orphans? I didn't get to watch it from the beginning. That was the story of her home. That was from 2016, I think. And that's what I mean. Like coming from a different culture and different people, and like I cry like much more like frequently at DPRK movies. Like even that Comrade King of Swine, which is like about that woman. You know, there's like the love story, and then it's also about her trying to become a trapeze artist or an acrobat, right? Like even that like has this underlying message of like ideological unity and the working class working to protect their own interests and show their own strength, that like it hits you in a way that capitalist movies don't a lot of times. And again, there is exceptions to that. I've cried at plenty of movies made under capitalism, don't get me wrong. I'm just pointing out what he's saying here actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. A literary work that contains a convincing ideological substance, which we can do much more readily when we get rid of this idea of that politics isn't what politics really is, which is just work with people. Who knows what the hell the West defines politics as? Because half the time they'll be like, "Your Honor, this person is getting political," and they're like using it like a verb, and you don't even know what the fuck they mean by that. Like, oh, in their vote against this thing in Congress, they got too political. Huh? What does that mean? You're politicians, aren't you? Like, I'm so fucking confused. Anyway, to continue. This core of a literary work is the main factor in defining the content of the work and determining the basic structure which gives life to the image. Even in writing scientific treatises, the author can only arrange his discourse into a system and develop his arguments when he has a core of ideological distinct substance to express. Nabil, welcome in. Great to see you. For instance, it was not until his discovery of the law of surplus value, which constitutes the core of his economic doctrine, that Marx was able to write Capital, which analyzes the whole economic structure of capitalism. Good point. Marx needed to study an enormous amount of material on capitalist socio-economic system, which is full of contradictions, before he discovered the core substance of Capital. In that same way, in the creation of literary works, scientific studies, and in other new undertakings, it is necessary to recognize the essential core by distinguishing it from other factors. This is what is meant by discovering the seed. So we all understand what discovering the seed of the work means now. So now when I use seed, you all know what I'm talking about. Not talking about what Westerners think of when we say seed. Okay? Let's keep that in mind here. In art and literature, the seed means the core of a work. It is the ideological life essence. Again, not that. Which contains both the writer's main subject and the soil in which the elements of the image can strike root. I know, life essence, seed, y'all's minds are... I know. Life is described in a literary work must deal with a definite subject, drawn from human experience. A writer does not take everything from real life, but only those aspects of it which are the expression of urgent and vital problems, as seen from his class and ideological standpoint. The seed means the living embryo of the work, and the ideological essence which the writer has discovered for himself in real life. In the course of his search for human subjects, the seed is the basis and the kernel of a literary work. It integrates material, theme, and thought in an organic relationship. If a writer is to create a fine work, he must first gather valuable material about life. This material serves as the life-giving soil, which nurtures the seed as it grows and matures into an artistic image. So it is of greatest importance in guaranteeing the ideological and artistic qualities of a work to choose from life material which is appropriate and fresh. But the mere recital or arrangements of these facts, no matter how valuable they are in themselves, cannot ensure an ideological and artistic qualities of literary work. Actual life events can only serve as the basis for the realization of the concept and the theme of literary piece, once they have been analyzed, appraised, and artistically reshaped by the writer. In this context, the material constitutes the basis provided for the seed by life. A writer must select and fully understand the right seed on the basis of which to define the theme in concrete terms. The theme is determined by and restricted by the seed. So it is impossible to discuss any themes effectively without selecting the correct seed. Find your seed first. Find the core of your writing. It has always been a simple waste of time and energy to attempt to write randomly, and usually no substantial result is produced when the act of creation is not linked to a correct understanding of ideological essence, even in cases where straightforward questions have been dealt with. To say nothing of those cases where the themes included general discussions of matters such as revolutionary traditions and the revolutionary transformation. In the final analysis, it is clear that failure was inevitable, where any question, concrete or abstract, was made the basis of creative effort without the ideological essence being fully mastered. The idea of a literary work is also derived from the seed. So a valuable idea can only be clearly expressed when the seed has been fully grasped. Only an outstandingly worthy seed can serve as a source of a clear and meaningful theme and idea. If a work has been produced without a distinct seed, simply in order to depict the heroic struggle of the People's Army, or the beautiful spiritual world of Comilla Riders, the author will find it impossible to deal with important social questions, and therefore to express his idea correctly. So we must always get down, when making revolutionary work, to what the ideological essence is of the characters and the situations we're writing about. For example, when they were writing Puglia, right? They had to the seed that they were writing about was in depicting an analogy to the struggle against feudalism, and how the tools which can be used to fell feudalism can also become a limitation eventually on the current development of society, in much the same way capitalism does in the defeating of feudalism. Is an example of like picking a correct seed that then is reflected in the theme. A writer can only do justice to a valuable theme and idea, and create a suitable artistic image, which is capable of expressing them, when he has discovered and fully understood a valuable seed from life. This seed is the basic factor ensuring the ideological value of the work. This value depends in turn on the strength of the artistic image, which expresses the essence of life. The ideological qualities of a literary work, therefore, are only assured when it raises important questions and depicts them perceptively in accordance with the logic by which life itself develops. And this is, again, where capitalist cinema loses us. Because oftentimes, when we're watching capitalist cinema, we see life events play out that don't depict what really would happen. For example, Like, I can think of a trope that you see oftentimes in a lot of capitalist movies, which is like the boss who's made aware of how he's like over exploiting his workers or doing something harmful to his workers. And then he's made aware and he's like, oh, the kid's been struggling real hard. Let's give him the factory. You know what I mean? Or he like all of a sudden makes everybody's work just like really good, all of us. You know what I mean? Like, he just has to be informed of the problem. And then they come to understand it and do better. Or the CEO that falls in love with the poor girl. A theme which has been banned recently in China, right? These unrealistic depictions of life that don't actually relate to anything most people in life experience. The ideological substance, which has been acquired by the writer in his quest for the essence of life, can serve him as the core of literary work, which clearly depicts the typical features of the historical period and the society, and also helps people to develop their own outlook on the world. And of course, he's mentioning it like this because you could be writing about a feudal society. You could be writing about, any period in time. You have to consider the ideological substance. Encouraging them to make positive innovations in their own lives. For example, you have like a good example of this is let's say that you're making let's use the feudalism example again, right? If you're making a work of like characters in a feudal society, you can't make them having like the revolutionary ideology of like someone living under capitalism, the knowledge that they need to get rid of all classes, etc., because like that's going beyond what the ideological substance of people in that time would actually have, and therefore it becomes an unrealistic and detached depiction. Attempting to improve the ideological level of literary work without mastering the ideological substance would be as absurd as wishing to harvest good crops without planting seeds. Some works contain suitable themes and interesting incidents, but still fail to move people. This shortcoming is often due to the fact that the presentation of the themes lacks ideological substance. Only images which have been accurately created on the basis of sound seeds are capable of incorporating noble and profound ideas. The seed is the basis which blends the ideological and artistic qualities of a literary work, the decisive factor in ensuring its value. And by value, we mean utility value, not exchange value, not price, not money, use value. We're talking here. How useful it is to the revolution, specifically. Since the seed is the ideological essence, which has been grasped from life itself, it has the fundamental capability of welding together the ideological and artistic qualities of their literary work. A writer does not envisage his seed as an abstract idea, but as a living entity, so that the ideological substance not only provides the main content of the literary work, it also contains the basis of its form, and is the essential factor which integrates the two. The seed also provides the ground in which the constituent elements of the image can strike root. Once he has mastered the seed, the writer can discern the outline of the image he is going to create. Until he is inspired with a clear picture of the basic elements of the image, including the context of life and its ideological essence, the character of the hero, and his relationships with other people, the scope of his life, and the plot of the story, the seed cannot yet be said to have matured, even if the writer claims that he has discovered it. A seed which gives the writer a clear artistic picture, that is, the prototype of the image, is a real seed. Only a seed which has a clear and vivid ideological essence can give rise to a clear and vivid picture of the elements of the image. The seed provides the writer with the basic impulse for creative work, as well as the source of artistic vision and creative enthusiasm. The writer is stimulated to worthwhile creative activity by a highly developed awareness of the noble mission entrusted to him by the party and the revolution. However, if he has not thought thoroughly, understood the seed, he cannot go on writing smoothly. The writer can only be fired with creative zeal and develop his artistic vision to the full when he has chosen a good seed. He will only manifest enormous strength and talent and apply himself to his work night and day with indomitable energy when he has grasped a seed which fires his heart with unquenchable flame. Indeed, the seed is the force which both drives and leads his creativity throughout. Excellent seeds are not only the prerequisite for an effective campaign for an exhilarated production of art and literature, they are also the basic factor which guarantees the quality of each work. Selecting the right seed is the most important thing in the process of creation. Writer must always concentrate on the quest for the right seed, one which is in accord with the requirements for the specific time and the revolution. If the cognitive and educational role of a literary work is to be maximized, the author must discover and clearly define a valuable seed which can contribute effectively to advancing our revolution and construction. The object in reality to which attention is directed, and the main aspect of social life from which the seed is selected are two major factors in determining the character and quality of a work of literature. They play a major role in the solution of all theoretical and practical questions arising in creative work. Since all the artistic elements of a work are chosen in accordance with the requirements of the seed, the correct selection of the seed is the key to a successful creative work. Above all, the seed must be chosen in accordance with the party's policy. Our party's policy scientifically determines the requirements of the developing situation and the correct way to meet them. It teaches people how to understand life correctly and change it for the better. Therefore, writers must first of all understand our party's policy completely, and then examine reality. Only those writers who approach reality in the light of the party's policy can see all the questions which arise in life correctly. What is important here is that they maintain a revolutionary stance in the selection of seeds and write about in order to champion party policy firmly. Rather than that, they study party policy for the purpose of selecting good seeds. If they only study the party policy from the viewpoint of some specific questions related to that particular aspect of life from which they intend to select their seed, they will be unable to grasp party policy in its totality. In that case, they will see even that particular aspect of life superficially and fail to find the right seed. Writers and artists involved in creating revolutionary works will only be able to effectively manage the ideological substance of their works in the manner required by the party when they accept party policy as their own conviction and their guide to creation, and reject the superficial tendency to regard party policy merely as something to be learned. Writers have to equip themselves effectively with the monolithic ideology of our party, the Great Juche idea. And the monolithic ideology, of course, just means that unity behind the idea of achieving full liberation, full independence of the masses from all those forces which fetter them, whether natural or social. So, writers have to equip themselves effectively with the monolithic ideology of our party, the Great Juche idea, and seek out the seeds which are of greatest significance in our people's life, and their noble struggle for the victory of socialism and communism. In the selection of living ideological material, writers should never exclusively emphasize artistic qualities at the expense of political requirements, on the pretext of observing the specific requirements of the creative process. Nor should they seek out only that aspect of life which is typically political in expression, under the pretext of choosing seeds of political significance. Seeds of social significance, selected from various areas, the struggle for economic construction, cultural life, or questions of morality, can be treated politically to any extent they wish. Why is that, chat? Why is it that seeds of social significance from any area can be treated politically to any extent they wish? Anyone know? The main thing is the way in which new socio-political culture and moral problems arising in our people's lives are explained in accordance with party policy. The reason, of course, is because everything we do is intrinsically political. So long as classes and class cleavages on a world scale, externally and internally, as long as those class cleavages exist, so too must this struggle. Now we're going to get an example here. The seed which was initially selected for the film A Worker's Family was that a man who is a miner is not necessarily a worker. And that a man who has worked in a mine for a short time does not necessarily belong to the working class. On the basis of the general intention to produce a film which would show the process of revolutionary transformation of a worker's family. The question could only be dealt with in this way. We help the author to understand life from a fresh viewpoint, in accordance with the party's policy. To delve deeper into life, and discover a more serious and vital new seed, defined by the socio-historical status of the working class, and their revolutionary cause. As a result, he was able to grasp that the ideological substance of his work lie in the fact that members of the working class must not forget their origins, and that, should they remember them, but become conceited, only continuous personal revolutionary transformation will prevent their deterioration. This seed is of tremendous importance. It teaches people that the workers and everyone else must continuously revolutionize themselves at all times. In light of this concept, people can clearly see how the immediate requirements of the situation are met by the party's policy of improving the leading role of the working class through revolutionizing that class, which is to be an example for the revolutionary transformation of the whole society, and for its modeling on the working class pattern. So you see how there was a seed that the artist first mistook, and that would have affected the whole work that he was working on. And when he discussed that with Kim Il Sung and the WPK, he came to realize that the seed of the work should be something else. A seed must conform to the requirements of party policy, and also be capable of being expressed artistically. Perhaps when we watch the movie today, we all can try to figure out what the seed of the work we're going to be looking at today is. The seed, which is the core of a literary work, must be such that it can mirror party policy artistically, in accordance with the intrinsic nature of humanics. Remember, literary work in revolutionary struggle is humanics. We learned that previously. Even when the task is to present the party policy on economic and cultural construction, the seed must always include within itself the problems of the people who are carrying out the technical and cultural revolutions. If a writer has discovered an ideological essence which fails to provide him with any idea of the characters of principal figures, the relationships, the compositional elements, and the mood of his literary work, all of which are fundamental to his creative endeavor, then he must have selected a seed which should have been dealt with by philosophy or political economy, not literature. In fact, there are occasions when some writers work on literary pieces dealing with ideological problems, which cannot be the seeds of literature. They will not be successful with such seeds, no matter how hard they may try to create excellent images. Even valuable ideological material cannot touch people's hearts unless it is expressed through an artistic image. In the selection of the seed, its political ideological qualities must not be given absolute priority at the expense of its artistic significance. Anything which does not permit artistic description cannot be a seed of art, no matter how politically or ideologically relevant it is. That is why the seed is referred to as the basic factor, which guarantees the artistic quality of the literary product. A writer without the right seed can provide neither ideological nor artistic quality. If they are to choose a seed which has political significance and artistic value, writers must study a wide spectrum of life and experience it to the full. Kim Jong-il says, "Study and touch grass, and you will become a better movie maker." Oh, that's what's wrong with J.J. Abrams. Just so disconnected from society, man thinks people are mystery boxes. You see. We figured it out now. Thank you, Kim Jong-il. In this respect, it is most important that they should be in the thick of life. See it for themselves, the noble lives of the working people. Listen to them. Feel and understand them. Living in the midst of real life, they will be able to discover the seeds necessary for their creative work, while at the same time educating themselves, politically and ideologically. But they will be unable to write anything good if they merely gather those facts which please their eyes and ears, material based on superficial view of things. When they experience in real life, they must pursue new seeds with definitive objects in mind, and must not fail to return with excellent seeds. Needless to say, it is impossible for a writer to gain first-hand experience of everything, nor does he write solely from his own personal experience. Sometimes he has to write about something which he has not experienced, because of the circumstances of his present life, or because he is writing of life in former times. When he has to write about the past, of which he has no personal experience, he must take a greater effort to study and analyze events in that period, and discover the seed which represents the essence of those times. For example, the seed of the film Five Gurreal Brothers could have never been discovered without studying the life of the O's, including Oh Jung-hwa and Oh Jung-hup, those indomitable fighters dedicated to the revolution. Even when one is involved in real life, one cannot discover a valuable seed unless one approaches life with a high degree of political awareness and a keen eye. Writers must know how to observe real life in its breadth and its depth. They must sense in their hearts the aspiration of the times, and their noble spirits must be unquenchable in their ardor to fight for the realization of those aspirations. Only then will they be able to discover the seeds containing new essential subjects, which can contribute to the people's revolutionary education. The seed must always be new and have its own unique features. Selecting a characteristic seed from real life is the prerequisite for the creation of an original image. The primary selection of the seed, which serves as the ideological and artistic basis of literary work, is the starting point for the creation of the original image. I'm glad you hung out, Alberta Socialist. The choice of a distinctive seed will enable the writer to deal with new and important subjects in his work and create a forceful and interesting image. A new and distinctive seed means a seed which is original and creates and contains in a novel form a new shoot for the development of life. Such seeds are not easy to find, not because they are as rare as specks of gold on a wide sandy beach, but because it is not easy to recognize their quality correctly, although there are plenty of them to be found in life. In order to uncover a seed with these distinctive qualities, it is necessary to explore new areas of life. New artistic sensibilities and original images stem from new and distinctive seeds. Therefore, writers should avoid banal repetitions, although they should always also seek distinctive new seeds in the environment with they are familiar. The choice of the environment from which the seed is selected is of great importance, not only for the creation of original works, but also for catering to the high level of the working class people's artistic tastes, by mirroring their lives in a variety of ways. Careful cultivation of the seed will bear excellent fruit in creative literary work. The selection of the good seed does not, by itself, guarantee the successful completion of the literary work. The seed can only serve as a prerequisite condition and the basis of a literary creation. Even when a good seed has been found, the creative endeavor will be certain to fail if the seed is not properly cultivated. Having chosen a good seed, the writer must concentrate all his skills and artistry on it in order to develop its narrative potential in depth. A correct realization of the writer's ideological and artistic aims will only be achieved by carefully tending the seed throughout the whole course of the narrative, after they have been selected in accordance with the party policy. Remember, throughout the work, the seed is perfected. Before you start the work, and during the course of writing the work, of course, that seed is a prototype image. In the cultivation of seeds, it is important to define the characters of the figures appearing in the work accurately and describe them clearly. And remember, each one should have incredibly unique individuality, which is perhaps the hardest part about writing characters. The seed's potential finds its expression through the portrayal of the characters of the hero and other figures. If they are not chosen properly, or their characters are portrayed illogically, the seed will prove worthless, no matter how interestingly the story is written, and no matter how meticulously the dramatic situation is built up. The principal character in whom the seed's potential finds embodiment is the hero. For this reason, writers should pay special attention to describing him or her skillfully, although they have to describe every character in the work well. If a seed is developed into an image, the situation must also be described well. In art and literature, people are only deeply influenced by ideas which are expressed through the flow of life. Life is complex and varied. Writers should choose from its varied features only those aspects which meet the requirements of their seeds. They must not include anything which has no connection with them. If aspects of life which have no bearing on the seeds are included, these will obscure the ideas which should be expressed in the works, and consequently prevent the writer's artistic intentions from being interpreted correctly. Artistic creation requires not only clear ideological intentions, but also the creative skill capable of expressing them. Without this skill, it would be difficult for a writer to succeed in his creative work, even if he has selected a good seed. After selecting a seed, a writer must subordinate characters, events, anecdotes, conflicts, and every other artistic element to it, by correctly following the basic line of narration developed from the requirements of the seed. He must not ignore these requirements, even in the wording of a dialogue or in the setting and treatment of a scene. Hi, Mew. Literary creation is a process through which writers produce clear images by representing, in accordance with the nature of their seeds, the experience which have made a deep impression on them. Therefore, writers have to be able to experience life and to reflect on it, to apply their enthusiasm and imagination at all times, even in the process of developing their seeds. Works cruelly expressing ideas which are not clearly described in accordance with common sense and show life as it is without adding any artistic elements are the result of a low level of creative skill. Oof. It's gotta hurt. That's gotta hurt. If they are to affect people deeply and provide powerful inspiration for the new endeavors, literary works must include valuable seeds, which have been chosen from life and expressed through highly artistic images. The correct selection of seeds and their skillful cultivation are the decisive factors which ensure success in creative work and guarantee a valuable outcome. In the selection and cultivation of seeds, writers must study seriously and comprehensively and think deeply. Those who devote their time, energy, and thought to the selection of good seeds and their skillful cultivation will always harvest excellent fruit. And there you go. That brings us to the end of this part on writing literary works for cinema. Next week, we're going to be reading from Themes Should Be Treated in Such a Way as to Enhance Their Political Importance. Again, another thing that movies and capitalism essentially avoid doing. And that's why we see so much slop in capitalist society movies that make you feel nothing. That are just like, much to ponder. Much to ponder. And I do find, like, perhaps if you're not a writer, if you're not. Larry, that was such a banger read. Thank you, Mana. Perhaps if you're not a writer or you're not a creative yourself, which not everybody is, right? It might not speak to you that much. But if you are a creative and you're trying to make revolutionary work, this shit gets your gears thinking. And this is like all important stuff to keep in mind when we're actually creating work. And while we might be talking about cinema, you know, a lot of these concepts will apply to creating art in other fields as well, including this type of like political art as well. It's like, because we're kind of doing like entertainment and this, you know? Yeah, exactly. And you can think about how many you can think of like two major problems in capitalist society that you see. Works that are created with no clear seed that are just like, just sort of this amalgamation of events that they know will be that they know will be like popular or that they know will sell a lot of tickets. And so you'll see this amalgamation of events with no real clear seed, and then people are left to interpret all of these different fucking messages in it. Or you have the other hand, which is like the seed ends up being overshadowed by like these irrelevant characters or these like sidetracking stories, you know? Oh, I did stay on retro gaming all day. I got a bad habit for that. I gotta get out of that habit. Wow, I'm surprised their numbers stayed as high as they did then. Whoops. Alright, back and just chatting. Next will be good because we're going to be dealing with themes next. Themes which come out of the seed as well. I do like this one example that he gave up here, by the way, of that book. where this one right here, the worker's family. I thought this piece right here was such a vital part of the read, where he said, the seed which was initially selected for the film A Worker's Family was that a man who is a miner is not necessarily a worker, and that a man who has worked in a mine for a short time does not necessarily belong to a working class. On the basis of the general intention to produce a film that would show the process of revolutionary transformation of a worker's family. However, the Workers' Party of Korea, Kim Jong il, helped the author to understand life from a fresh viewpoint in accordance with the party policy, and thus to delve deeper into life and discover a more serious and vital new seed, defined by the socio-historical status of the working class and their revolutionary cause. As a result, he was able to grasp that the ideological substance of his work lay in the fact that the members of the working class must not forget their origin, and that, should they remember them, but become conceited, only continuous personal revolutionary transformation will prevent their deterioration. I love that. So the work became what he was saying, this comment on how a worker, not necessarily a worker who has worked in the mine for a short time, etc., and trying to portray a family's revolutionary transformation, when really what the seed should have focused on is the need to constantly transform ourselves, to constantly study revolutionary material, and to constantly put revolutionary theory into practice as well, and inspire the working class to do the same.